Rolling.
um, I'm André and Zachery. I am an assistant arts professor here at NYU in the Tisch Department of Dance, and I'm here with Reggie Wilson. I am the artistic director of Renegade Performance Group, based in Brooklyn, New York as well. I use he, him pronouns. I am a non disabled artist, and for accessibility purposes, today I am wearing a gray sweater. I am a dark skinned black man with gray hair, and I think that's about it. And I have a black goatee. And with that, I'm going to pass it to one of my good mentors, Reggie Wilson.
I'm scared of the word mentor. Hi, I'm Reggie. Reggie Wilson. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that enough?
I feel that's enough.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Choreographer. Artistic director, Fist and Heel Performance Group.
Aha, there we go.
Brooklyn, New York.
Mm-hmm. Who just had their season at the Skirball Center April
4th and 5th, 2025.
Yes. And so the reclamation.
It's called a reclamation.
Yeah. What were you reclaiming?
What am I reclaiming? Anything that's up for bids.
Oh.
Anything. How did... The last piece I premiered in New York, well, the last piece I premiered, the last new piece, major piece that I created, was in 2019. So that just felt like a long time not having a dance work or a dance season in New York. We had a BAM season in 21, 22, like just as we were crawling out of the pandemic. But that piece had premiered in 2019. So for me, it was really this idea of getting through the pandemic, getting through the passing of my mother, and kind of reclaiming the centrality of my life around my career in dance making.
I want to stay on then lineage, because I know that that is something you draw upon in your work, and something I learned from it, especially around. And I'm not going to say the word identity, but I do want to speak about lineage from your roots in Milwaukee, but then your deeper and longer roots with from the Mississippi Delta, and how with those lineages you call upon the aspects of your family, of the rights, if you will, RITES, and something that has always struck me, since literally I met you and first saw your work in 2006. You knew what you were doing with them, or at least for me, I was just like, oh, Reggie like asked the questions and like really does the work to be like, actually, how are they supposed to be used? And then in a way that you, not just ownership, but there's a sense of like, no, this is our collective and way of using these rights, and in the way that you then bring them forward to us to experience is can be coy, can be like hyperbolic, and I just love you to expand on that.
Well, I'm going way back, and not way back in time or in lineage per se, but way back to the beginning of what you started saying. In lineage, like I feel like we all have multiple lineages that we pull, call, and sit in. So I feel like I'm always calling on all of those. So there's the concert dance lineage that I feel like is also always like hyper present in the studio, in my thinking. There's kind of the lineage and culture of experimental art in New York City and in the United States that I'm also have some relationship to. And then there's the ethnic or biological, cultural, all of those are cultural also, but thinking back that I am from Milwaukee and my family came up from Mississippi and from Arkansas, and I spent a good deal of my early professional choreographic career doing research to find out specifics and details and information about what were the assumptions I had about that background. What were the things that I had maybe inside questions about that I never had the courage or the time or the context to kind of like ask specific questions about why do we do that? Where did that come from? Or how did that get here? Or why do I think this is mine when it's actually a whole region, a whole country, a whole quote unquote race? And I feel like maybe those are the questions I'm asking. I don't know that I, have when I go about making a piece. I don't know that I have a thesis or a question. I think for grant writing purposes, for PR purposes, we have to boil it down into something like that. But it's usually a curiosity. And I feel like it's through what I call and what I consider dance making, the way for me to relax into an obsession. And an obsession is usually something I can't stop thinking about. And it's that random. And if it just keeps coming into my psyche, and keeps showing up, like the first time it shows up, I'll probably dismiss it. But if it shows up on PPS, or it shows up in several conversations, or if I get a ticket and I travel someplace and it's there and I see it, or the dancers are also coming in and thinking about it or talking about it, I was just like, I want to know more about why this is interesting to me or curious to me. And I feel like through the dance making, I can do it in a way that's not about linearity, if that's a word. It's not about scientifically proving or solving a question, but it's an opportunity for me also with the folks in Fist and Heel, who are kind of my sounding boards, to be able to say, does this have any relevance in Trinidad? Does this have any relevance in Senegal, in Sierra Leone, in China, in India, in Egypt, like in Japan, in Turkey? Like, does this question or practice or thing have a manifestation or a context in those different places? And if so, how does that compare to my assumptions or my relationship to that thing? So people have accused me of overcomplicating more than one thing, including life and relationships, but it's I believe life is complex and complicated, and how can I see as many different perspectives and sides of it as possible, and not just feel like what I think is the way to be. I feel valid and sit in my perspective, and feel like my perspective, it's through dancers, through my dance making, that I feel valid moving through the world, through different classes, through different contexts. And the more information I have about those contexts, the more I can feel human and validated as a human being, and not feel that I'm less than because of this, or this, or somebody else's perspective about me.
From my own experience, again, being someone who has been an audience in your work and then also being in your process as a performer, for me, what's always been interesting, and what you were just articulating, you often seem to stack these things like next to each other, or like almost in the like way of like a Jenga set, if you will. That can sometimes it's like fragile, sometimes it's like holding together, sometimes like ooh, but in a way that. But
like, do they have a relationship?
Yeah. And so like I remember like a great example of that when I first the first work I saw, Pee Coochie, the tail. The tail. The part that I remember the most, well, there's several parts I remember the most. I remember the end that I again, and seeing the reclamation, I saw some of it come back. The part I believe it was Michel Kouakou, and I forgot who else. The rolling on the floor and the counterclockwise.
Yeah.
That has always stayed with me for so long. Like I've always just loved that moment. Just the raw physicality, the intention of it, ensuring that it was going counterclockwise, and that relationship. But it was another moment where you, and it was again, I believe it was you and Michelle, and some swing was on, and I think you were doing some like Lindy and things like that, and then it was like, okay, let me see what you got, and then Michelle was going, and then you were like, okay, hold up, and then like the music dropped. And Kaya came on, Stilettos Pumps in the Club. And I was just like, and it was in the middle of, back then, historically DTW.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I mean, historically, like,
the old DTW.
The old DTW. And like, I mean.
Was it?
Yeah, that was 2006. That was pre the.
I feel like that was the new building.
Oh, no, it was a new building.
It was a new building. It was still, before it was New York Live Arts.
Yeah, before New York Live Arts.
Yeah. It was still DTW.
Yes. But for me, knowing that, and essentially that was still it was like, whoa, like you were inserting Stilettos Pumps in the Club in a very white space. And so for me, I had known, because I had gone to Florida A&M and HBCU for 2 years. So for me hearing it, it was just like things are supposed to turn up, like things supposed to get down, turn up, spin up. And so I'm just like, well, are we supposed to get that? And then so I'm looking around at folks like, well, do y'all know what's happening? Right. It was like, and then and I was so young, and I was like, oh, but it doesn't matter. Reggie knows what's happening.
Or do I?
Or did I? or did you? But for me, but in a way that I guess that's going back to what I was stating earlier about these rights, and in the ways that you're like, no, I'm going to use it like that, and that for me was always incredibly inspiring. In the way that it was a little bit of trickery, and like calling a little bit upon like some issue and a leg, but it's like, we don't do that. And so for me, that was really interesting in relationship to in relationship to postmodernism, where I feel like the gesture can sometimes always hinge upon the ironic. In a way that this was almost in this was an unforced irony, if you will. And so that taught me a lot in terms of like, oh, this is how you making space, but also because you're doing Lindy, and then Michelle breaks out again, but then like I was like, oh, Reggie's actually going across time right now. This is time travel. Oh, this is space time travel. Dang.
I feel like that's something people are being legible and articulating now, which is very interesting to me. Like time, space, and being able to articulate that by watching my work.
Yeah.
A lot of comments or responses to, I think, some of the stuff you just said. I encourage myself and I think of myself as being, I don't like being restricted. And I feel like I, as experimental postmodern downtown,
what is that?
Edgy or core, whatever, all this.
The historic
words,
moniker of it. Yeah.
All that. It's like I should be able to do whatever the fuck I want to do. But how can I do enough research or investigation to have a sense of context
Mm-hmm.
so that whatever I'm begging, borrowing, and stealing from, that I'm not doing it in a way that the community that it's coming from directly is offended or put off by it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's seen as an expansion or a relatingship to it. You know, it's not, I don't do thorough investigation of every step and rhythm that's in work that I do, but I usually have a context in which it's coming from. So for the tale, there was a lot of things going on. So it was called, the full name of the piece is The Tale, colon, Pee Coochie and the Tale of the Golden Dick. So I had a friend who is from Benin, who's a storyteller
Mm-hmm.
and a writer and author, a professor. And there was just something about African storytelling, because he like rewrote or recreated and published like African folk tales that he grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea as a lay anthropologist, if I'm collecting and presenting cultural artifacts, like how authentic or how much, for me it was not about being authentic, but about having integrity
Mm-hmm.
and being in a relationship with the practice with integrity, as opposed to trying to make it a museum piece and present it as it was perfectly. Because in cultures, like, cultural practices don't exist
Mm-hmm.
in that immaculate kind of shape.
Mm-hmm.
So the more I started researching and seeing that, I was just like, there's nothing pure anywhere, regardless of how specific the cultural practice or
Mm-hmm.
step is. It's never like museum, but by the cultural, especially in the African diaspora, like it just doesn't exist in museum quality, Western museum quality, like static, stuck finiteness. So I felt a little liberty as an artist going there. And so the relationship of art making and culture making, like thinking about what is that relationship, thinking about black folks and postmodern culture making, culture producing, like, are they, how different are they really, or are they the same? Who's getting credit for innovations and credit? So that also became like a curiosity of mine. But so the tale, I like had spent a lot of, quite a few years, probably that by that point a decade or more, researching in Zimbabwe and Southern Africa. So the way the script, the way we kind of spelled it out, it was sort of looked more like it was from Southern Africa. So instead of PP, like we would say down south, it was Mpimpi, Nkuchi. And Dick was spelled Dek, D-E-K, as if it was like a small antelope, like a D-I-K. And just when things are so far outside of it, as African Americans, we have so much more relationship and fascination with West Africa. Just presenting Southern African stuff was already kind of a disconnect. And so it's just like, let me, I'd done this with specific steps and like shorter dances, but I was just like, let these people think that this is an actual tale that I've researched that's historical. And then just leave that. But the content of the piece was, like I said, by that point I'd been doing research in down south where my family is from, in Milwaukee in the Midwest where my family is from, but also in the Caribbean, specifically Trinidad and Tobago, and then Southern Africa, more around Botswana and Zimbabwe. And I like to go out. So when I was going to those places, I'm going out to clubs and bars and hanging out and seeing what happens in there. And then I was home for one Christmas and I got really, really just like incredibly bored just being at home and doing family. But then I called up my cousin that I knew liked to go out. And I was like, okay, I can get out of here. And he took me to a club that he used to go to. And it was a steppers club. I knew nothing about stepping, the Chicago stepping, hand dancing. And I sat in the club kind of with my eyes bucked like this, like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, the lights are on, there's like old people and young people, and people are doing this like slow hand dancing thing, and not looking at each other, but in sync in a way that I've absolutely no idea what I'm seeing or what I'm going on. And this is in my own cultural backyard in Milwaukee
Interesting.
that I've been traveling all over the world. And this thing that feels like a fully articulated cultural expression is like a 2-minute drive from the house that I grew up in. And I drive by every day. Like, what is this? So I started getting fascinated by stepping. And so then I started going to Milwaukee and going to Chicago and taking stepping sets. And my cousin, Deshaun, he's actually a stepping teacher. So line dancing and stepping, as opposed to it's kind of like in my experience, first East Coast kind of exposure that it's rising up in the moment right now.
Yeah.
With the fans kind of made it blow up.
Oh, that's yeah.
But learning line dances and the same kind of methodologies that I would use when I've used in different places for other more spiritual kind of contexts. I was just like, okay, so I'd learn the dance, and then I was taking, like, before a step or set, there's usually like a class. And they're teaching you basic half turn, half, and then left turn, half left, half right, and and I'm learning these things. I was like, it's always on the left, oh, it's on the upbeat. You start on, and like how smooth it is, and the steps, and what the guy does versus what the girl does, and like how that works out, and it has nothing to do with mine being in New York thinking about Southside Merengue. Like, I was just like, so the tail was me thinking about Black social dance. And so looking at, a big focus started with the Big Apple and like dance crazes, and how the Big Apple had like these little like sections, but it was like these other mini, and then learning about Lindy and da-da-da-da. So it was all kind of squished together. And I'd also been traveling to Central, I don't know what they call it, Central or into Chad.
Okay.
And there was a dance, and what Michelle and I do to stiletto pumps is this kind of, which is a traditional Chadian dance, which is like this small upper body, and they do this kind of weird foot thing underneath, but they're paired up, and I was just like, and so Michelle, who's from Ivory Coast, had never seen it, had never been there, and so we were looking at video that I had taken, so we did that, but then we did it to stiletto pumps, so it was more layered than legible or anywhere in any kind of documentation.
Okay.
So what's legible, what's investigated, what's experiential, how to take that and put it in a context.
Right. Yeah.
It's free, but it's also about juxtaposition, because I don't know if it was before that moment or after that moment, there's kind of this, I forget which Trisha Brown dance it is, where they, is it called Spanish dance, where they, or flamenco, and they do, where they all pile up against each other one by one. Folks would know that. But there's also a quote, so I'm referencing multiple things in the thing, and depending on who you are, certain things are visible, and certain things look like, oh, Reggie created that.
Right.
It's just like, oh, maybe I didn't create that, or maybe I'm just like quoting over quote over quote, and because citing in performance is a lot more complicated, a lot more difficult than it is in written white paper scholarship. So I'm also always, I shouldn't say always, but a lot of times having fun with that also. About what do people think they're seeing, and are they actually seeing it? Or do they actually know the full context? Because I think culture is that way. Like, even if it's your culture, if you're not initiated, if you're not obsessed with it, you may only know it to a certain level.
Right.
So that is something that's super fascinating to me about humans and culture and emotional culture across the globe, and what those different structures, what those different contexts look like, and how they play out.
I want to go back to. I'm gonna get there. I want to go back to the stepper set because it's interesting because that was. I'm from Chicago, and so the stepper set was like something. Being young, it was like, okay, that's what we're gonna inherit. That's grown folks' territory.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like the stepper set, like we can't go to no supper club like we kids. We 9, 10 years old. But then, especially by the time you get in middle school and you're like going through your little adolescence, you're trying to like,
Or whether you go to the picnic or you go to
the
family,
cookout,
you're
exactly.
seeing it happen.
Your
in the
auntie,
living room, yes.
your cousins come through and they teaching you like, all right, well, this is like, no, move your hips like this, baby. You're like, oh, okay, like, and even when I got older, some older aunts was like, nah, you move your hips, you turn in this way. I was like, oh, okay, but it's interesting those. I guess what I'm interested in as well is those the different sites of exchange and how you kind of really pull those forward in a way, like in the sense that while you're going to do research, cool, but what's important is this, to me what's really important is you go to the club in wherever you are. If it's in Harare or
Port of Spain.
like you're going to where the people are, where this exchange is happening, and whether you in the thing with them, doing the thing, or jumping with them, whatever, you're just like, okay, so what these people doing? Okay, so but you're seeing like there's an exchange happening on this dance floor. And I guess now I'm asking, it seems at times I'm just like, would that be something you would want to try and extend? Because that's the participatory space, right? Like you could get up in the stepper set, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas now, if we're experiencing your work, you're not necessarily going to let us get on the stage, but you're still just like, no, there's an exchange that needs to happen in a way. Whether from what you are giving and from even us here, you're just like, nah, I still need you all to like exchange between us in a way. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand the words, but I also believe that as a lay, I will keep up with the lay anthropologist, what I believe is that there are rules of engagement in those contexts.
Yes, absolutely.
And so it's not a free for all.
Yeah.
I learned. I quickly learned how far I can push myself in these different contexts, or how much support I need. So it's like, is there a class in this? Mm-hmm. Can I get here before or stay after? And then I talk to the folks that are doing it, but also looking at who are the experts or the professionals, or like, what is that context to me is as much as important as the dance step. Mm-hmm. So I could do the line dances. I would get up for the line dances.
Right.
I don't think I ever got up in a steppers club and actually partnered with somebody.
But that's
so. But Michelle Kwaku, he'll kill me for saying this. We were in Chicago, and we've been learning the basic and doing stuff. And I think we might have even gone to one of the steppers class before. Mm-hmm. And then we were sitting in the club and drinking like we like to drink, and a young lady came up and asked him to dance. And Michelle usually is like the club get up. He could keep up with anybody.
Yeah.
So he got up. He did. I went to get me another drink. When I came back, he was back at the table. I was like, Michelle, what happened? He was like, this stepping thing. He's like, it's no joke. It's no joke because especially it's so complex. It's so subtle and complex, and the cues that he was used to for hand dancing is not how it's going on in stepping. Mm-hmm. So that's also it was just like, how are these people dancing together? It's slower than I've ever seen anything. They don't look like they're on the music, but they all are catching.
And sometimes they're not even looking at each other.
Majority of the time, they're not looking at it, and they're kind of like
because the
looking
head is
this
other
way and down and looking past, and I was like, what is this? It helped me understand so much more about Black Midwestern. And Milwaukee's kind of like,
and you have the face that.
There's several faces.
Somebody said,
But, so looking at how community, culture, individual status is structured within a context is also as important for me. And sometimes the things that I'm taking away aren't legible because it's not the step, it's not the music, but something from a quote unquote, as you said, a site is what I'm fascinated by. And so observation of the context is like it's really far up there. So also looking at how that plays out in the concert dance world, how that plays out in the postmodern dance studio, how that plays out in a university context, how that plays out in a ritual context, spiritual, let's say like a more Christian-based context in Trinidad and Tobago versus the more African and Shango context. What are the rules of engagement? Who is allowed to do what, when, where, and how, and to how much? And who has access to the information? Who has access to share the information? How much of the information am I gaining access to? So just because I have somebody of rank giving me information, giving me a pass, and telling me something doesn't necessarily mean that I actually comprehend enough to go further than they can hold my hand and take me. But also, often if it's a deep, ongoing relationship, it's also bringing that community or folks into the context. Like I make no game. I'm a downtown postmodern experimental, as I've said, post-African neo-hoodoo modern dance maker. And I'm not necessarily trying to save the race. I'm not necessarily trying to save the dance world. I'm not necessarily trying to save my family's cultural heritage. But I'm trying to work and act as fully and as deeply engaged with that, with as much access, with as much freedom as possible in it. I feel like I learn more about the thing by putting it in a context that I'm more familiar with. Getting the I don't, and the reason because I've tried getting audience participation. I'm not necessarily good at organizing and structuring that in a way that makes me happy.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I've definitely tried it. Hopefully there aren't too many video representations of it out there. But there's tons of things that I've tried. And I shouldn't say I pity the fool, but I do pity the younger generation or the folks that are starting to make work now or playing around with really finding their voice. Now, there's too many cameras. There's too much documentation. There's too much of a need to kind of have a good picture, video, snapshot of the thing before you necessarily get to play around with it enough. Not that you can't do it, but you don't have to put it on a platform that everybody can see it.
Can I ask a question? And it's not in defense of that, but can I ask a question? Do you feel that is also in relationship to legibility for resources and funding?
I think it's a relationship to a lot. It's money, it's funding, it's status, it's access.
Like the need to immediately, I got it.
It's the general culture.
Yeah.
But in the dance world, it's definitely related to that.
Yeah.
And the pressure that I hear from young choreographers to have to do that before they even know what it is. My pressure when I was coming up was like having to write a grant before I knew.
Right. Well, that's me.
Well, I had a title.
I understand. So what you're saying is actually what we experience.
Yeah.
It's like we need you to at the seed of idea or of
seed of nothing of not knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, we need you to have a nice, crisp, clean thing,
and they need it in order to get the money that they get.
Yeah.
It's a catch-22,
yeah.
but
I agree.
But choreographically, being able to make enough mistake, I saw as much dance as possible. I made as much dance as possible, but I was also selective about. Just because I made it didn't mean everybody had to see it. The thing that was important, somebody had to see it.
Yeah.
But I felt comfortable making something and showing it to somebody in the studio and getting feedback from them just in that context. And I'm a horrible pusher backer about technology and recording and documenting and holding on to. And I feel like you need to make so much that you can actually be selective or curate what that is and the manner in which you're presenting it, as opposed to coming up with a methodology to be able to present the thing before you actually, I don't want to say have a voice or have a perspective. Like, I usually don't get my question, which...
Well, that is something I feel your generation was afforded that we are not, structurally. Meaning that... You could be. It's absolutely 2,000% more challenging. But there are people of my generation and generation just before me that also felt a pressure or allowed themselves to be also pressured. So I just try... I guess it's more around... it goes back to the term, which in academia, here we are as well, which has definitive pressures. And that term is legibility, right? Around...
you have to make some stuff that's illegible to yourself and to viewers. And before you work through that,
I believe in
good
that.
luck.
Yeah.
And it's harder and harder and harder and harder and harder to take the risk or to see the value of taking the risk, or to stay in it after you've taken the risk and you've been deemed as untalented or making this type of work or asking these types of questions, and you're just like, that was one piece.
Yeah.
And the opposite can happen also. You can make a piece and it blows up and everybody loves it, and then they want you to make a version of that piece over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been super lucky in my career of being supported doing whatever I want to do.
Do you feel like that support has come from...
I just feel like I was committed to doing what I wanted to do.
Right.
And not necessarily...
Well, I mean, this is because you mentioned. I'm going back to you were talking about the literal sounding boards of like the people. I know
the people in the studio.
Who like that community, like like historically, like Retta and Lawrence and people like that who've I've looked and I came to the performance with Yatande Whitney Hunter, like
Yeah.
these people who, whether they're with you or afar, like it's like they believe in your work. Like you could call them and be like, "What's this thing?" And you could have like a 2 hour conversation to figure something out.
Yeah.
And then but that's the thing. And so, I guess how do you? Because I also feel like there's this notion that community has to be like this grand big thing that I'm just that for me when I recognize your practice, I'm like, no, Reggie's built a very healthy community that has afforded you the ability to really unpack these ideas in a way that however time needs to work, right, to realize them.
I'm thinking there's I go into because I get into trouble. I started getting into trouble because I said I hate words, and then it was just like, okay, I hate the power. Where did I boil down to? Finally, after decades and years, it's just like what I hate is the power that the written word has over the body or the kinesthetic in Western culture and our culture. And so all of that drama is coming from me hating a number of words that are words that everybody uses now or people feel like they're searching for. That sometimes by using or finding the word, you cut yourself off from actually being able to create it. Like, I've always hated the term mentor, and I have tons of folks that are basically really my mentors. But for me, they're colleagues or they're friends that I can ask for advice and be in a relationship with. I hate the term community. Hate the term allyship. But I think I build basically what those words mean or hold or what they're directing folks towards. So I don't know why I want to say that. It's just like having a sounding board of folks doesn't make me just do what they say I should do, but it's being able to have a conversation or relationship to understanding. And also I feel like a community feels like a fixed, closed group as opposed to it having flux and being able to go in and out of it and have relationships about it. Because there's a number of folks that have also been along for the ride for a long time, in and out of Fist and Heel. And we used to have what we call Fist and Heel members at large. But those were folks typically that, for a performance or something that knew material that might be able to be called up to step into the work, they knew enough or understood enough of what we call the Fist and Heel principles to be able to, without too much stress, be able to kind of get it. Because you had me confused, maybe this will tie it up, when you were talking about the tail. And it depends on which performance of that you saw. Because if you saw me and Michelle Kwaku do it, that wasn't who it was made up on first. That duet with the spinning was first made up on Paul and Edessa Weeks. And then Edessa wasn't able to do some performances, and we brought in Penelope McCourty. And then Penelope McCourty stepped out, and did Edessa come back on tour with us? But then Paul was sick, and then Elaine got sick and then passed, and so we went from like a cast of 8 or 7 down to 6. So being able that the piece could be able to shrink but still hold as much water as possible. And then that spinning part that you talked about ended up being done in a duet on Paul and Anna Schoen. And then Paul and Raja. But the original duet material It's in the Reclamation was actually from a duet that Terry Hollis, who's late, and Stephanie Tuman
Oh.
were in. But then Paul stepped in for Terry, and then so these different bodies being able to step in and have different relationship to the material on the context for me starts to replicate what I'm seeing out at what you call these sites,
Mm-hmm.
where community is actually functioning, happening, and not fixed and static.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
And it's interesting because I'm thinking of some of the site work you've done. I'm thinking of I believe the piece was accounting for customs.
mhm.
It was at the custom house, but then also in your work Power, how site is such an important place. I believe the Shaker House is that true?
What they call a
Yeah,
meeting room.
yeah, and how and how you. It's so interesting how you kind of draw you're able to kind of what you were talking about, like direct the energy of like what these what these sites are intended to do, and really say, okay, this is what is the intention of this space, this site. This is how I want to use it, and that's really interesting to me.
It's collecting enough information and then not being in denial that a theater is got its own history. A
Okay.
site has architecture, and how can we build a relationship between this investigation, this material, and is it dance space?
Mm-hmm.
Is it the BAM Opera House? Is it the Skirball? Like what? And those pillars, my goodness. Like how to not ignore the pillars.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How to not ignore the pillars.
Or we could have just covered them up, but
The ones at the custom house
mm-mm,
or dance space.
mm-mm. That's Skirball.
Oh, interesting.
Those pillars. And then the customs house, that's another long story. I feel like it's too long to go into now. I feel like we should be wrapping it up.
All right, then that'll be it next time. That'll be it next time. I just want to, I guess, finish on because I know that was part of the tension of this not your outright rejection, but like this distancing of the written word, and I think about the legacy of the Jali or the griot, of like this embodiment, right? Interesting enough, Marlon James, the writer. I don't know if you know the writer Marlon James.
I don't believe I do.
Amazing writer. The most recent text is called Black Leopard, Red Wolf. They have another text I read called A Brief History of Seven Killings. He's the Jamaican writer. Another book called The Book of Night Women. But in this text, Black Leopard, Red Wolf, he writes about that tension of losing the griot, right? And I'm circling that back now to and even, part of my roots in the Mississippi Delta, and how the blues woman man kind of resurrects that, and how do you kind of place yourself and your practice in relationship to that? We're thinking about like a Bessie Smith, a Ma Rainey and her Black Bottom, and then like a Willie Dix and all those other little blues men and women, Robert Johnson being the devil at the crossroads.
There's two things I think that in something that you said. One is thinking about Robert Johnson and his proximity and the crossroads that every time we go home, go that down south.
49.
Yeah, and cross over to get to Helena, to get to Marvel, Arkansas, which is where my family is kind of from. So anyway, that just pulled me and think about Robert Johnson. I sold his soul to the devil. When I was working on a piece called Moses's, and I was doing research in Israel and Egypt, in Alaska, in Mali, and in Mali I had the opportunity to interview, spend time with 3 jellies, griots, because it's just like we're always talking about in Western New York, we're always talking about the griot, the griot, and the griot, and the griot. And what really blew my mind, one in particular really blew my mind, it was just like, it's not just the jelly griot that we kind of have as that figure, but it's a whole system. So that tends, every time I do like these research at these sites, or like because of a cultural practice, the thing that blows my mind is that it's not just a dance, or not just a step, or not just a figure, or not just a melody, but the whole matrix and complex around that supports that. And so what was interesting to me, which I had been seeing, is just from taking Sabar class in New York, is like the complex, it's not just that figure, it's like there's a whole griot family or jelly family.
It's a network.
That, well, it's a thing that holds it up. Like somebody knows the song, somebody knows, certain individuals are responsible for the link. Like you end up majoring or focusing with a specific kind of, other people are doing the dancing, other people are learning the steps, other people are knowing the history of the kingdom, other people are knowing each person's or each family's lineage to the kingdom. And certain people don't have the right to overstep. Like the people doing the lineage stuff know the dances, but they're not the ones that get up and do the dances at the big official things. The ones who sing and can sing and say, name this person, this person, this person, and this person, and sing your lineage to you, aren't the ones that get out and do the stuff. They know it, and they know the rhythm, but that's not. And so thinking about culture in that kind of matrix, also thinking about African Americans and what rights, roles, responsibilities we have in relationship to the African diaspora, as opposed to feeling like, oh, we don't have the laws, we're reclaiming, we're trying to gather this. It's, because of the transatlantic, because of the Middle Passage, we have the right and responsibility to articulate something that's not articulated about the whole package. So for me and the performers and the dancers that I work with, they come in and come out and provide different responses or relationship, whether they're from China, Argentina, Brazil, Ghana. That human, that puts me in a relationship to the world. Having different generations puts me in relationship to different time periods that I didn't have before. So I don't see myself, and I feel like I have the responsibility to stick a dance together. The dancers have a certain, the costume designers have a certain, but it's all together that we create a thing that ends up, I get to stick my name on it more. But that's not the whole picture, and it's messier than that. So, yeah.
Thank you, Reggie.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, André.
You're welcome. All right.
Cut!